Africa. And my God, what an enthralling trip. Cause what other country will lay?
What's happening? And welcome, to the greatest podcast going, the anti-George Carlin, George Carlin podcast. And I'm a little bit under the weather today, so let's, right from the get-go, let's lower the bar for old Ross and Nazareth here. And if you are a returning listener, as in like you listen to previous episodes of the greatest podcast going, the anti-George Carlin, George Carlin podcast, and you returned and chose this particular episode today to listen to, which happens to be a sacred subject matter of consciousness, thank you. I'm super grateful I get to share this with you. I appreciate you listening and returning. Because, look, I understand the plethora of selection options and varieties of podcasts presented to you. And for you to choose this one in particular is special to me. So thank you. And, if you're a brand new listener to the greatest podcast going, the anti-George Carlin, George Carlin podcast, welcome. First and foremost, welcome. Glad you are here. And you're a 10 out of 10. You were a 10 out of 10. You came into this world a 10 out of 10. And you were going to leave this world a 10 out of 10. And nothing changes in between during the process of doing life. And sometimes I forget that I'm beautiful. Oh, don't say that, dude. That's corny. I forget I'm beautiful. I forget I'm a 10 out of 10. So I'm just reminding the new listener that you are a 10 out of 10. And we're talking about consciousness today. And if I do my job as a professional podcaster, I want to provide a reverence. I want to speak about consciousness with honor because it's a trending buzzword. Consciousness. Everyone's talking consciousness. And oftentimes it lacks a depth and weight. So I want to provide that. And if I do my job, we're going to go into spirituality then, and hopefully and carefully, I'll dive us directly into the deep end of the pool. Because the deep end of the pool, ladies and gentlemen, is where it's at. It's where it's at because that's where the most freedom of speech and knowledge is withheld and suppressed. It's where ideas are withheld. Why? If I had to take a stab at why, I would say it's always been that way. It's a spiritual warfare. It's spiritual warfare. That's what it is. It's not physical. It's not mental. It's spiritual, and it dates back to archaic times. If you study history, the first people to silence speech were the high priests. That's accurately true, historically speaking. And uncommonly known, though, they mainly, suppressed and banned speech from other religious affiliates. Like, there's a lot of religious wars. It was a bloodbath, kind of insane. Archaic times were crazy, but secondarily, they would control and suppress speech of the populations, communities, kings. Because if you can control, speech and control information and suppress information, you control how people think. And if you control how people think, you control consciousness, which may be the most powerful entity on this planet, possibly even the universe. And if you're listening to this transmission, sorry, I'm going to try and be serious this entire podcast to provide the reverence I was just speaking of, but if you're listening to this transmission on April 14th, 2025, you are the spiritual resistance. And modern day is the most significant time span in human history, human civilization, possibly ever. And in modern day, it's not the high priest, it's not churches that are silencing and restricting speech. It's politicians. And to be honest, I believe that politicians are doing the bidding of the lobbyists who are controlled and gridlocked, and the control mechanism there will be money, obviously, by these big corporations who have monetary incentive to restrict the free flow of information in the deep end of the pool, consciousness, ideas are withheld, because if they withhold and control the information, corporations, if they control information, then we become the enslaved population, mindless, hypnotized, mesmerized, worshiping materialistic endeavors, buying their products that they're selling, and we can be manipulated and led in the future in a predictable manner. It's very sick. Human civilization is pretty sick, man. It's sick controlling people like that. I can't imagine for money. Come on, dude. So, anyways, things I hate the most, I disdain the most, which is anger is a secondary emotion. I don't know what the primary one would be. Maybe that I see myself in other people, but this will segue into the consciousness thing. I'll put a timestamp if you want to skip this segment on podcasting. If you have aspirations and dreams of doing podcasting, at the very least, you're passionate about a topic or subject that you want to talk about and provide to the world, this segment is for you. And also, if you're even the slightest interested or curious in how the podcasting sausage, so to speak, gets made, how to start it, the enigma around starting a podcast, and how does ad revenue work? How do you get supplemental income from it? Then this segment's for you. But if it's not, and you just want to skip to the consciousness, I got your back. Ross Nazareth has your back. I'll put it in the timestamp. So, I guess I'll start with, I was a Department of Defense environmental scientist, way different than environmentalism. I was a scientist, chemist. I mainly did volatile organic compound, groundwater and soil remediation, military bases, China Lake, which is a weapons for facility, Vandenberg Air Force Base. I traveled everywhere, man, like Johnny Cash. And like Johnny Cash, I was also in a punk band at the time, which there's an applicable analogy to podcasting, a trick to the trade that I picked up. And it's a kind of a unique, not that I'm special, I'm just not extra special. My opinion's no more valid than some of the bad advice I hear, but it's unique. And I do have some secrets to reveal, especially about the ad revenue, because no one's transparent and honest about that. You'll hear that on this podcast exclusively. But first off, my first podcast was with my phone, no audio, no camera, no stand, nothing. With my friend who's a comic, up-and-coming comic, Kate Calabrese, hilarious, cool. We did multiple. She's awesome. Check her out, Kate Comedy on Instagram. She's going places. Did I mention this? I don't know if I mentioned this. Anyways, the applicable analogy between the music industry, which I was in, and my first song I got, BMI royalties, which I still do, tens and twenties of dollars. Not rich by any stretch of the imagination. Was BMI royalties. There's an algorithm through the distribution of the song where wherever it's played, you get paid. Essentially, it finds it and you get paid. It was in like surf videos, skate videos on Instagram, and at the time, it was cool for me. And I learned a lot. And the biggest thing, I played the Viper Room in LA. Don't look up my punk band, please. It's embarrassing. It really is. Don't look it up. But the applicable analogy is this. So when you're playing live music, I don't care if it's punk music, like what I played, bluegrass, jazz, you want to be in tune, because I was the singer and you can't find pitch and harmony if everyone's out of tune. So it has to be palatable to the ears. Biggest applicable analogy I can possibly provide of substance and free flow of information directly to you, the valued listener, which I'm grateful for. For the audio on your podcast, this is so important. You want to have a software where you record it, right? And you want to eliminate the peaks and valleys, the highs and lows. And I know you know what I'm talking about. If you listen to an unprofessional podcast, it's almost it's so distracting listening to highs and lows and my ears, dude. You want to throw a compressor I use a digital compressor at the very least, threshold options, along with a limiter to limit the highs and lows, right? This is the biggest trick, because in the music industry, it's standard, it's par for the course, status quo, to mix and record at the studio and then send it out to a separate person to master it. Excuse me. I'm a little bit under the weather. So what you want to do after you throw the compressor, I use BandLab. It's a music recording program. I bought the extra features, $7 a month or a year. I'm not sure what it is. It's worth it. And then I throw it in DistroKid, which I distribute my music, which I own the mixing and mastering sides of. I put them in my podcast to have an additional source of ad revenue. You throw a very low mastering program on the audio, and now everything's balanced. And I'm an average dude. I'm not a top tier engineer, I'm an average dude, but the newer podcast, like this one, would sound okay in a car speaker, a couch speaker, a phone, a computer, headphones, doesn't matter. That's what you're going for. You're going for to make it sound palatable and not distracting. And by the way, this is a Siren Razor. You can buy them anywhere at Walmart. My fat butt, YouTube, sat on a microphone, right? And I like that one. I was ordering a new one online, and I'm like, this is a temporary fix. And lo and behold, this one kicks butt. So you don't need fancy equipment. This one plugs directly into a laptop. You can do them podcast anywhere at that point. And so you don't need fancy stuff. Just make sure you compress it, put a limiter, try a mastering software so it's balanced and sounds warmer and it eliminates the peaks and valleys. And then the last thing, no one's talking about this stuff, it's ad revenue, and we'll get into the consciousness. This is taking too long. I'm not feeling too hot right now. So we lowered the bar already. We can't unlower it. But ad revenue, right? So BMI royalties, that's one way I increase commercials and ad revenue on my podcast. YouTube, I upload directly to YouTube. That's a whole different animal. And I don't even want to talk about that on this podcast. But for my podcast, I then distribute, I use Podbean. And that's just the one I selected. I don't think it really matters, but Podbean, it sends it to like 12 or 13 streaming services, including YouTube, but it doesn't have the video. And some of the services you never heard of. Boomplay, Deezer, Spotify, everyone's heard of that. But why you do that, why you need to do that is you want to cast a wide net, so to speak. You want to maximize your outreach. It's common sense, it's intuitive, but people listen. There was like my most listened, you don't know what people are going to find interesting. There was one I did on debunking stoned ape theory, because, I'm a scientist, and people think that theory is silly in the scientific community. They laugh at it. It doesn't even make sense logically. But, the whole deal is you have no idea what people are going to dig. So you want to throw out a wide net, right? That's basically what it is. And specifically on Podbean, you can use whatever you want. I'm not telling people what to do whatsoever. It's just what I do. And at 10,000 streams, which is a lot, but you build it, they will come. I believe in that. I believe in you, and I encourage you to chase your aspirations if this is something you find interesting. So at 10,000 streams, doors open up, opportunities open up. Essentially, you have access to more ad revenue opportunities, sponsors, blah, blah, blah. And there's a lot of, the internet's here to stay. Technology's here to stay. And the ad revenue does take a while to obtain, to say the very least. It really does. I had one offer. Dude, you're going to get fished. You're going to get fished constantly. One legit offer, but I'm putting the songs in, so I'm getting some supplemental income. And that's essentially how the sausage gets made. There's maybe 5 to 10% of podcasts that make 90% of the money. Then there's the rest of us, essentially. And there's a tremendous amount of money within those 5 to 10%. And I'll probably end on this note. If you have any questions that I didn't answer, leave it in the comments and I'll give you a genuinely thoughtful and concise answer. I'll think about it and provide it to you. And I'm going to take a quick intermission because I need some high quality. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you, the valued listener, for bearing with me through that brief intermission. I had to get some liquid granular activated carbon filtrated high quality H2O. You guys know what's up. Podcasting ain't easy under the weather. I appreciate lowering the bar for this. But I'm very passionate about this subject, and we'll dive right into the deep end. And if you have any questions on the previous segment, put it in the comments. I'll give a thoughtful, concise answer to the best of my ability. So diving right into the deep end here, there's so many different places we can go. And what I intuitively want to talk about is, this is just my language. There's different parts of consciousness. There's the little self, I call it, and then the authentic self of consciousness. I'll give you an example for me specifically of what the little self looks like, because it manifests in specific and predictable ways. Have you ever been driving in your car or truck alone, but you're not by yourself? You have imaginary conversations going on with, they're real people. It's just imaginary, hypothetical situations where you coincidentally happen to be seemingly winning every argument. And, if he says this, I'm going to say this. I'm going to own him, dude. and you're winning, and you're reliving an emotion, and now you're feeling emotions driving down the road by yourself. What is going on with that? That is resentment. It comes from the Greek. It means to relive, but that's a common manifestation of little self in consciousness. And it wants to be in the driver's seat. So it manifests itself in very specific ways. But if you have that, and I have that, and everyone has that, that's not us. That's a phenomenon of consciousness. It's fear, right? And these are all different flavors of fear. The granddaddy is fear, right? These are all different progeny, fecundity of fear. And I would say self-pity is, for me, it was a big one, to be perfectly honest. Even right now, I'm not the happiest I've ever been, not the richest, I'm the brokest I've ever been. God truly writes straight with crooked lines, because I have no idea why I'm doing this podcast today, but I'm not some guru. I'm not some... You are as close to God consciousness as anyone else, and you are what you're seeking. That's the most fascinating part about consciousness to me, that you are what you're seeking. It's from within. It's not external. That's a primary function of consciousness. Nothing on the outside can manipulate you, hurt you. Hurt comes from within. Same with miracles. Miracles occur from within. It's not a physical thing you see. It happens within. And that's hard to get across to people. However, meek as Moses, if you translate that correctly, it means the mastering of consciousness itself. So mastering of prayer is synonymous with mastery of consciousness. Oh, dude, he's talking about prayer. Come on, dude. Look, dude, I was right where you're at. I thought I rejected prayer for like 25 years. I was suffering so much. I became so broken that I just shut up. I became teachable to spiritual principles and religion because I was going to die. God writes straight with crooked lines. I don't know why I'm talking about this stuff today, but I don't care if you believe in prayer or not. It works. It doesn't matter if you believe in it. I never believed in it when I started praying, and it works. And then you get faith, and then the next time something difficult comes up, you have more faith, and then that exponentially increases, and then you come to a point where you go, I'm safe and protected at all times from prayer. And consciousness may be an individualistic focal point to God itself. Maybe we are all tethered to God through consciousness. We are all connected in a very strange way. That's undeniable. The strangest phenomenon about consciousness, look, I'm speaking about consciousness using sounds with my mouth. Vibrational wavelengths and photons from camera and light are being sent to satellites. They're being transferred back here. Cell phone towers, and transfigured. They essentially pixelize and digitize the vibrational wavelengths via sound and photons on your screen where you're watching me for your 4K entertainment. That's fascinating if you stop and think about that. Using this Reezer siren, $20 from Walmart, you can get them anywhere. That's not nearly as fascinating as consciousness. It's mind-boggling. It's baffling. What is consciousness? Is it spirit? Is the soul? Can you measure it? How does it enter into a human being? How does it exit? What's going on? So I think there's different parts of consciousness. And real quickly, I want to go in this direction very quickly to elaborate that it's not just one thing. Consciousness is multiple things at the same time. This is just my language. I'm not sure if you can read this in a philosophy. This is my direct experience, really. So I break my consciousness up into two parts. One is little self, one's big self. The authentic self. The little self always wants to be in the driver's seat for me. That can't be you. It can't be the authentic self if I have the same thing, you have the same thing, everyone else does the same thing. That's weird. It's just a phenomenon of consciousness, right? And in Buddhism, the sixth sense is thinking. You're not trying to see right now. You're not trying to hear. It's just occurring. Same with thinking in Buddhism. That's the sixth sense. So if the mind just does that, right? But if you master consciousness, which is synonymous and applicable to thinking or prayer. Oh, he's talking about prayer. Dude, I was right there. I thought prayer was nonsense. Doesn't matter if you believe in it or not. It works. You know, if you're suffering and broken enough to become teachable about spiritual principles, it works. So the little self, it has common, manifestations. One's resentment, self-pity, which, to be honest, I'm not the happiest I've ever been in my life. I'm the brokest I've ever been. God writes straight with crooked lines. I don't know why I'm doing this podcast right now. There definitely have been better times in my life to do this and talk about the subject I'm passionate about. But, I'm not some guru, some dude that has everything together by any means. And self-pity was a bad, little self for me. Self-pity was a bad one for me growing up, and depression, stuff like that. So these are common manifestations. Financial insecurity, whatever it is, right? The granddaddy of all of them is fear. So that's the little self. It's trying to get in there. Maybe it's a reptilian leftover, phenomenon. I'm not sure what it is, but it's there. And everyone knows it's there. But that's not us. How can you be a resentment? It's so dumb. But it's trying to claim that it's the authentic self all the time. I'm growing my hair out. No, you're not. You're just not cutting it. I'm growing my nails. No, you're not. You're just not cutting. It's involuntary, and self is trying to claim ridiculous things all the time. A good example is like moms that I'm growing a baby. Self is trying to bypass the most magical consciousness event. When you say that, you had sex. That's all people know how to do. Everything after that is biologically involuntary. It's magic. And then how does the consciousness enter the baby? It's all fascinating stuff. Is it the soul? Is it the spirit? You can't measure it. So maybe one day we'll be able to quantify what consciousness is. In the meantime, I want to talk about how powerful consciousness truly is. When I talked about the phone, when I talked about podcast or starting a podcast, or this apartment complex, or the Empire State Building, or an atomic bomb, hydrogen bomb, nuclear reactors, cargo ships, Panama Canal, doesn't matter. It all started with consciousness. If you can align your thoughts correctly, which is taught in the military, positive thinking has no bounds. And like I was saying, nothing on the outer can affect the inner consciousness. We allow that to occur, and to pick up healthy consciousness habits is the biggest antidote, which is, again, the hardest part about starting consciousness habits is starting consciousness habits, prayer, sharing some gratitude. Thank you. God is good. I love myself. I'm going to take a vow to be healthy. I'm going to take a vow to, pray today. Do something as simple as that, spiritual kindergarten, that I also rejected if you're one of those people. But it starts to work, right? And you allow it to transfer your consciousness from the God of reason, the little self, to resentment, and giving power. Because why the little self is such a cunning little enemy is because you feel very important when you have the resentments. Oh, I'm so important. I don't like this person. Can you believe it? Then you have, people marching, Donald Trump has got to go. They feel so important because, they're not living their authentic life, and self has totally taken control, and their authentic self is lost, It's a horrible existence. They're enslaved. They're hypnotized by not having access and knowledge of the deeper end of the pool, which is their own consciousness, the most powerful entity on the planet. And then you can get stuck in the victim cycle and blaming others, and that's all little self. The authentic self operates on a much higher wavelength frequency, and it may be a part of the individualistic focal points of God itself. And we're all tethered. We're all connected in this very strange way. So I guess I'll close with consciousness. The craziest part that I found out is you are what you're seeking. It's not external like anything else in spirituality. That's fascinating to me because the whole time it was from within. Come on, that's the last place I would ever look. And then all the people that told you when you're growing up, there's something wrong with you, whatever. There's something wrong with those people. And what happens is we allow someone that was angry, which is a secondary emotion to begin with, angry with us as children, we carry that with us. But there's nothing wrong with you. There never was anything wrong with you. You're a 10 out of 10. You came in this world 10 out of 10. You're going to leave a 10 out of 10. That's where the consciousness lies. That's the authentic self. We may never be able to define fully what consciousness is or who you are fully, but we can define what it's not. And that's a significant realization I have had, that you can define that resentment. You're not a resentment. You're not self-pity. You're not depression. You're much deeper than that. You are so much bigger than what you think. Now we're talking consciousness.